All right. Well, today is a special day because we, Christie and Martina, are having our first podcast together as best friends and business partners. And so this has been, a few months in the making as a business and over a year with following our intuition. We didn't know it was going to end up here when we first met. We first met at an energy conference. You remember that, Martina? Like you had just come off stage and rocked the house.
Yeah, I gotta say, you were you were my favorite person to talk to that day. Because it was like, I came out, had a line of people to go through, and then as soon as the line was done, I turned and there was Christie sitting at this table alone. And it was like, oh, I'm going to talk to this lady. Yeah.
Yeah. And I kind of had my eye on you because I wanted to sign up for whatever it was that you had just pitched, but I, for whatever reason, couldn't find the thing. And so when you turned around, I like kind of caught your eye. I was like, hey, and you came and sat down and I was like, perfect. Cause I think I had just given birth or something. I didn't want to walk around and I came by myself too. I didn't know anyone there. So yeah, one thing led to another and we became besties.
Been a fun journey, especially this last year, because that's when we kind of stayed in touch. And then this last year is when it really was like, oh, hey, yeah, I want to work with you, Christie. Because we always kind of knew we'd have something together. And I was like, well, let me just hire you. And it was like, oh, no, that's not it. But that was the beginning doorway into all of this amazingness that's happened this last year. So
that's true. Yeah, that's true. I hired you first. You did a whole little, it was really great, like a deep dive assessment, because I've never met anyone else who knows as much about personalities as you do, besides me, of course. And so it was awesome just to have someone else, help you kind of explore the iceberg that we all are. We think we're something, on the surface, and there's so much more below the surface than we can even fathom. So there's so much value in being able to see, have someone you trust, really, really look at that and really help you see parts of yourself that maybe you've undervalued or underappreciated.
Yeah, those sessions were so cool. I really thought that I was just going to get, explore a lake. I'm going to go scuba diving in a lake and I'm going to discover all the little corners of this little waterway. But it was like, the more that I dove in, the more I realized it was more like, it was like an ocean. Like you're going to explore every part of the ocean. It's impossible. And the more I went, I was like, no, this is like exploring every nook and cranny of the universe and like a galaxy. You just cannot fathom how unique and how amazing each person is. And it was absolutely true. You're the only person on this whole planet who has ever rivaled me on knowing as much about personalities. Like all of the different personality theories and stuff. I think you were right there with me. I think, I had a little bit more with like the handwriting analysis and facial profiling, some of those aspects that I've kind of went through. But other than that, like the personality tests, you were right there.
Yeah, you're full on like the handwriting profiling and the face profiling. Like I had like dipped my toe in the water, but man, like that it's incredible the amount of knowledge you have in that area. And then yeah, you hired me to help with your business, and then it was like we rode off into the sunset together as friends, so to speak. So this is exciting because this is the first episode of the Soul Spectrum podcast, and you'll hear more about us as we go on, but we really want to focus this episode on you guys and talk a little bit about what it means to have an intuition-led life, and if you're an entrepreneur, an intuition-led business. So
intuition.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is one of my favorite topics to talk about, for sure. Intuition it can be kind of this big category. There's actually, like these different parts to intuition. Sometimes people use the word intuition when they're referring to like the human instincts, right? Like there's the instincts that we have. If you're walking down a street and there's a dark alley and you just have this feeling, don't go down that dark alley, or, so that's kind of the instinct. Then there's also things like when you're young and you're taking a test at school, they often will tell you go with your first instinct, like choose your first, the one that you first go with. And they've, done all these studies, and it's like, statistically speaking, you get a better score if you just go by the first one you are leaning towards versus overthinking and kind of changing your answers. And so there's that type of intuition that's a little bit more like that. And then there's uh, each of us have our own unique blend of intuition. And in Soul Spectrum, we teach about this. We talk about your intuitive personality. We go into your intuitive language. Because all of these things, and there's other things that we add to the spectrum of our intuition and our identity. But each of those elements really play a part in how your intuition, how your personal intuition shows up. And then and you can see those trends throughout your entire life, even as a young child and into adulthood. Sometimes we can kind of suppress them if we doubt them and maybe think that they're like, oh, that's stupid. We learn not to trust them, but we can still see the threads of those intuition gifts throughout our whole life. And then I really do believe that we come to a point in our life, and I know that you share some of this too. It's like you come to a point in your life that it's time to be reborn. Actually, I think it's a series of cycles of being reborn and leveling up. And part of just discovering and developing your intuition is part of that leveling up process. And actually, if you are wanting to level up as much as you can in this life, then intuition is crucial. It's you've got to have that. Like it won't work. You cannot evolve to your highest potential if you do not have that element in place. And then, of course, then there's this aspect. I truly do believe that in this day and age, I believe that God is like pouring, it's like that scripture that what is that? Like Joel 2:28 or something. It's talking about how the Spirit is poured upon all flesh, and how these gifts and these abilities can start waking up. And I really do believe that, coupled with our own personal leveling up experiences, coupled with planetary awakenings, and also this Spirit that's being poured upon the earth, where God is calling us to rise up and be who we were born to be. And it's like this call in our heart that if we don't answer it, it's going to drive us crazy, and we'll feel like we'll explode if we don't get that out. So I truly believe it's kind of this whole process there. So
yeah, I love what you said. And one of my favorite quotes is Albert Einstein. He says, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. And we've created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. And just in my journey to really opening up and strengthening my intuition, I can really see how that was true. It's like, hey, I would explore spirituality. I also religion as well, because those aren't necessarily the same thing, and they're not mutually exclusive either. And you're taught certain things in certain circles. At church, it's the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, and there's always like a certain way that it shows up that is the most common way, a burning in the bosom, or and it doesn't always occur that way to everyone, and that's what I love about learning about what your intuition personality is, your intuitive personality and your intuitive language, which we have a quiz right now on our website, soulspectrumuniverse.com/personality. You can go take that quiz and find out what your intuitive personality is, and really learn how your intuition shows up for you. Because intuition, Holy Ghost, Spirit, universe, like, the sign on the sidewalk, whatever you want to talk about, like, however it shows up, like, you've just got to learn to see and feel in the way that you're wired to feel it, and not necessarily like flog yourself because you're not feeling it or hearing it or seeing it the way someone else does, because everyone's gifts are different. And like you said, like, everyone has a different blend. So Martina, can you just share, like, how does it show up for you? Like, what are your top intuitive languages? And maybe I can go through mine, and then so people
yeah.
can see how it's different.
I would love that. I actually had a quick thought right before that that I think is really important for all of us as we're learning and developing our intuition too. Is one thing that comes up for a lot of people is, and myself included, sometimes I'd see someone who was more gifted than I was, or was tapping into it more, or even myself, I just would feel things. And I wanted those answers, and I wanted the floodgates to be open right now. Like I wanted the parting of the Red Sea, like Moses, pour
Totally.
the Red Sea and go. And that is just, it's not typically the way that it works. In order to open up the parting of the Red Sea, that open up the floodgates, it really does look like following the breadcrumb trails. It's listening to that little voice and saying, talk to this person, read this book, do this, open up this, go here, walk here, call this person. I mean, it's those little tiny voices. And then what happens is as you start to trust it and go forward and use it, then it goes more and it's like goes faster and faster and bigger. And then looking back, you're like, oh yeah, like I can see how far I came. But if you were to, it just doesn't happen overnight. It really is like a muscle that you have to develop and learn. And so for me, it was really, so let's just like looking back at my life, like I was saying, how you can see some of those patterns. Now, I'm not going to really dive into like talking about like the instinct type of intuition. That's just like you're a human being. You have some of those
Well, it's
things.
kind of like survival based too. It's
Yeah,
like
it
sometimes
really
it's
is.
rooted in the ego, which I love Wayne Dyer's. Ego stands for edging God out.
Yes.
And like intuition, I just feel like it's when God is included,
Yes, like bringing him into the scenario. Like it's this constant communication
Mm-hmm.
of like talking and listening. And so looking back, there was an experience as a young girl. I'm just going to share this experience, if that's okay, and then I'll kind of tie it
Yeah.
into now. But I remember when I was younger, and there were things that I just kind of just had, and I didn't really think too much of it. But there was this one particular situation that stands out, and it was where or I was playing with a basketball of my mom's, and I was not supposed to touch the basketball. It was like a special thing that all of her friends had signed when we had moved from
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma and we moved to Utah. And it was like this forbidden thing. Don't ever touch my basketball because it has her friend's thing on. And what did I do? I played with it. And we lived on this hill, kind of on the mountain, and the ball rolled down the mountain. I couldn't find it. So at the bottom of the hill, I was sitting there on the curb, and I started crying and praying with all my heart. I'm like, where do I go? Where do I go? Like, I got to get this ball. And I just remember feeling like there wasn't like any clear answers, but it was just a little, like I described as a tickle in my shoulder. I was like, I just feel like this little tickle in my shoulder. Like I got to go this way. And so I walked this way to the right. And then it was like, okay, well now where do I go to find the ball? And there was another tickle in my shoulder. And I was like, okay, go this way. And then, it was kind of like a tickle, just kind of like in my left shoulder. So I'm like, it was on the left, but I wasn't at the bottom of the street yet. So like, well, where is it? And then the tickle stopped, like my body stopped communicating this. And then I just went, well, where is it? And I looked, and it was underneath a car tire that was parked on the side of the road on the left-hand side. And so those were just how I got my answers to my prayer. Heck, even younger than that, I remember finding a Barbie earring in my carpet. Remember old 80s Barbie earrings? Like I lost it in shag carpet. Like that's a nightmare for a little girl. And I found it by feeling where it was. Like I was just like, well, where is it? And kind of putting my hands over and kind of feeling where my hands would kind of do that same little tingle. And that was the way that the Lord answered my prayers for so many things, and then also I did have dreams. I also, emotionally, oh my goodness, I'd pick up things from people. I was like a big giant emotional sponge. I didn't know what to do with it, but I would feel these things so intensely. Sometimes it was negative. Like sometimes I'd pick it up so much and so overwhelming for me, then it would lead to like self-harm urges and just some really like, I don't know how to process it as a young girl. I mean, those kind of things came at like age 6. So there were some more of my gifts coming up with emotions. And then the dreams, and then like some of the things that I would just kind of see in my head, like those were to be another one, a visual one. And so as I grew into like teenagers and early adulthood, a lot of that I kind of suppressed, because then it was just my self-worth, not feeling good about myself, just not really trusting, and also doubting, letting the voices of logic and reason and only what you can see in front of you, and feeling like you don't know best, you're not good enough, all those things kind of shut off those gifts and being able to tap into it. So it wasn't until I started kind of healing myself and starting to learn to see myself through God's eyes, learning to love myself, that these gifts started really opening up and blossoming again. And then it eventually led to, about 12 years ago, I was on this really spiritual journey and just trying to align myself so purely to the Lord, like 100%. And I was studying light and in our homeschool group. And then I was like, oh, that's kind of some symbolic things with like scripture. So I highlighted every scripture with light and darkness in it. And then I started thinking about what that looks like in life, to think about light. I mean, I totally went the light way. And around that same time, I started to see light with my physical eyes. It was like the sensitivity to the electromagnetic or spiritual light. I have a friend who describes it from the scriptures as a gift of beholding glory, because I can see different. It's not just like glowing things. It's like strands and patterns and connections. And if I look at a human body, I can see where it's dark. I see imagery all the time, like a very, just very visual. And all of those gifts, being able to see the light, see emotions, see darkness too, is kind of how I describe it. Like my eyes literally like bursted open at one point. And then it is the intuitive language. So they burst open, and then it took me a long time to figure out, to decipher the language. Because then I'd go, whoa, am I crazy? Because I'm seeing spirits and things that I didn't know I'd see. So it was time researching and studying, looking at like some of the science of it, but then also dropping my knees in prayer all the time. Also the scriptures, like I was like, Lord, teach me what this is. So he kind of helped teach me this intuitive language. And now to this day, my dominant ones that I use when I'm every day is that body, the way my body responds and talks to me, the way I see things, and then also how I feel things. Those are my dominant ones. That's how my intuition has just grown to being a little bit more highly developed, just from trusting that and following the path through my whole life. But yeah, tell us about yours, Christy.
Well, I want to comment on that first, but yeah, it was all like, whenever you tell that story, I'm always thinking like the heads up display, like Terminator, like they like, that's how it is. It's like a scanning the room, like the Matrix.
It looks like whenever, oh my goodness, when it first came on, it was really overwhelming. It looked like X-ray vision. Everywhere I looked, it was like that computer overlay where you kind of see things and it's like, and just strands and connections, the movement. And that's the interesting things. It's not just like, oh, I see a color. It's like, oh, there's movement and communication between things and people and objects and in a person, and like everything. I watch a movie and I'm seeing almost like a light energy kind of floating off the screen, and I can see dark ribbons moving through the background. So I know that there's like something off with the plot. Like there's so much to it. So.
Yeah. And some people listening might be like, oh my gosh, I could never be like that. But I just want to say, like, we all have this ability. It's like strengthening a muscle. So you could have an atrophied muscle that doesn't get much use, or you can be constantly strengthening it and then moving up and up leveling those gifts. Like I can totally see that in my own life too, just how, it's gone from pretty much non-existent. And yeah, just since we've known each other,
we've known each other, you're like skyrocketing in these intuitive abilities and gifts. So
yeah.
But yeah, it's awesome.
No, it's crazy. And like, I mean, because of my personality, and this is where personality kind of comes in, I would doubt a lot more than maybe someone with another personality. Like I almost would feel like, am I crazy? Like, did this really happen? Like, just some extraordinary experiences that have happened over the last few years. And, I would say that I had, growing up, like some pretty good intuition, like, but more in the instinct category, as opposed to like maybe what we would define as more spiritual direction, although that's how I look at it now compared to where I am now. But back then, you could probably think, that is, like, I would definitely have like a strong sense of like right and wrong and like truth, and like I would be able to distinguish truth from lies pretty well. And I just remember, like, my husband and I were going through 7 years of infertility, and we were trying to start a family, and it was really, really difficult. And this was a time in my life where I was really depending on myself. And, I was really striving after results and achievement. And, there were times during those 7 years where I just was so angry with God. Like, I totally just shut it off because it was so painful. It's like, you try to go to church and put on a happy smile, but meanwhile there's all these families, when it's such a family oriented place to go, and you're just reminded constantly of like this fact of life. And I just remember, like, towards the end there, because it did have a happy ending, we do have 2 beautiful children who are complete miracles, but towards the end there, it was like, I had these 2 very different experiences with 2 very different doctors. And I remember, after we failed, this one time, I was like, I don't know if we can do this again. Like, I really, like, this is hard. And I started researching depression and infertility. And just because it was just so hard. And I remember seeing an ad for this doctor, and I just had this like energetic charge, like, like, call that doctor, like, do it, and that was totally my intuition. Sorry, I'm going to teary. But like, it just like hit me like a ton of bricks. And then like that experience with that doctor was so much different than the first doctor. Like, it was night and day, literally. The other doctor told me it was my fault, because I was so stressed, or I had this, like, entrepreneurial lifestyle, right? That, was high demand on my energy. And this other doctor was like, well, that's a cop out. You know, there's women in war-torn areas, war zones, having children. That has nothing to do with it. And then he like explained it to me like a math equation. Like, seriously, like, I was reminding me of like advertising 101. It's like, so many people will see your ad, so many people will click on it, so many people will come to your website, so many people will contact you. And I was like, yes, this makes sense. And we were 2 for 2 with that doctor, and it was still difficult and all that with the physical demands, and the highs and the lows of like, is this going to work this time? But that was when I really started leaning into my intuition and really like making it a priority. Like, that clearly was my intuition. That was clearly intuitive information coming from God. Like, do this, and it ended up great. And, I was like, it's so funny because I feel like in a way I was being such a fraud back then, because I'd go to church and then like, like, you hear all the stuff and you're like, yeah, go through the motions. And then it's like, wait, this stuff is real. Like, and then I stopped taking it for granted. And then I just started like, okay, I'm going to really dive into this head first. Like, how can I really develop my spiritual gifts? Like, they talk about them in the scriptures, like, like, I feel like in a way, like our like, just like Albert Einstein said, like, in a way our society is set up to turn off this gift. Like, we're almost conditioned from a young age, like, oh, you just have imaginary friends or whatever it is, and taught to trust our logic and our rational mind. And I'm sure our parents also, I know our parents like can play a role in that, and our upbringings and things like this, and even our personality. But yeah, it's just so interesting how, so now like it, I can see how just all along, even in my career, like where I would be reading copy, and I know the perfect picture, Like it would be in my mind. And then I go look for it in a stock photo website, and it would be the perfect thing to put with that copy. And from hiring copywriters over the years, I realized that that is not a normal thing. Like I would expect a copywriter to be able to do that, and they couldn't do it. And I realized then that it was like, well, that is part of my intuitive language. Like I receive images and symbols. And even when I'm writing, I will hear words and I think it's me, but it's not really me. Like it's coming from somewhere else, somewhere like this higher, wiser, more creative part of me, or God, or whatever you want to call it, like people listening out there, whatever you want to call it. It's like, and some of the musicians and artists have even said, like famous ones have said, that they don't really feel like it's them making the art. They feel like it's almost coming from outside of themselves. So
Mm-hmm. I love the way you say that, because like sometimes when I see things, I call it it's kind of like a perfectionist eye. I just like can see kind of some of the divine, like if it's in its most beautiful form. Even like if I see somebody doing a handout or something, or a flyer, and I'm like, oh, that one needs to be balanced here, and it needs this and this and this and this. And you totally have that same thing. And especially too, I've seen it, you do it really too with the hearing and the ears. Like you say, words come into your mind, but then into your mind, and even kind of like you hear it when somebody else is talking. I've heard you talk about how when somebody talks or when you read something, it's like, that doesn't seem right in picking up that information. Because it's like you have that ability to navigate almost like one of the more divine paths of how it could be in a more aligned, higher, frequency or higher level of light. Kind of like my eyes work, with light, but it's like you get that in your knowledge and eyes and sound. So it's really cool.
yeah. And sometimes it actually physically hurts my ear because I'm like, no, that's not right. And it's a good clue. It actually, I feel like it speeds things up. Like the other person doesn't need to know that I'm experiencing these things, but it's like, tell me more about that, like,
Yeah.
or what about this? And I'll just hear a question in my head. Like, it happens all the time on my podcast too. Like when I'm interviewing someone, it's like, ask them about this. And I'm like, where did that come from? It's really cool.
Well, I love thank you for sharing your story too, man. I was getting teary eyed as you're sharing it too. But one of the things that you brought up on there totally relates to how intuition works in every area of our life, and including our business. And it was like when you were talking about the different doctors, if you had just kept going to the same doctor, it would have taken you more time, more money, more frustration, maybe not gotten the results that you wanted. But then you listened, and then you found the right one, and then it happened faster, and you had more meaning and more peace and more like all those things. And I really do feel like that's the key to our intuition, is when we listen to it. Sometimes it might not make sense right off the bat. You might have even actually had the thoughts of, I've already invested all this time and energy with this doctor over here, and now you're like, am I going to wait, take more time and more money going into this other path? But then once you do and you make that leap, then everything goes faster. And we do that all the time. Oh my goodness, the formation of our soul spectrum, universe, new business, like all of the aspects here. At first, when we talked about, is this what we're doing together? When we first started creating it, and then it seemed big, and it was really kind of like, oh my gosh, this is going to take a lot of time, and it could be really big. And then all of a sudden we really step into putting it into form. And then all of a sudden we're realizing, oh yeah, we created this 4 months ago. Oh yeah, this was last year. Oh, here's a program. Here's something I created before. Oh, here's this here. Here's my insight here. I didn't know how it all came into play. And it's like something that would have, honestly, looking at the vastness and how amazing this business is, it would have taken years, and probably not even remotely been even scratching the surface of the depth and the amazingness of it. But here we are, and it's like it happens in record time, and it all fits, and it makes sense. And these images, and like I've seen you create like my book cover. You created my book cover in 15 minutes, I swear. I mean, the details.
Don't tell people that.
No, it took longer
I don't charge
afterwards.
by the hour, by the way. So,
No, it will, and it's because you knew me and you knew what to capture. Like you've been with me on this journey, so it's not. Yeah, it's definitely not something you want to be like. I can do this. Promise that to anybody? No, we don't promise that because sometimes intuition also takes us down paths that seem longer, and then you look back and you're like, oh, that felt like so much drudgery and work, but now looking back I can see how there was purpose in it. And then even further down the road you may look back and go, oh, that path that was so long and treacherous, looking back, oh my gosh, that was nothing. That drudgery that I went through at that moment actually saved me time later and peace and makes sense. And it's like there's no one size fits all. You can't it's like,
well,
oh,
and nothing's wasted. That's the other lesson is there was, yeah, specifically like a program that I put together and then never launched, but I felt like so good about it when I was putting it together. It was like what I always wanted to do. And, it was like, and then it's like, here it is, like it's coming into this along with everything else, so yeah, I mean, you never know. And like you said, like it might seem like your intuition is leading you down almost like a dead end, but it's not really, because nothing's wasted and there's purpose to it, because it's almost like in the specific experience of this business, it's almost like it's that line upon line. It's like this one thing builds onto this concept, builds onto this concept, and then boom, you have a business that looks like it's been in business for 10 years. Well, we both have been in business for 20 years. At least. So it's not like we're newbies, but I mean, just the business entity itself looks more mature than it actually is because of that quantum creation that we like to talk about.
Yeah, we do. Like, I mean, like looking back, it's, you've had all these different businesses and all this experience, and I've had all these different businesses and experiences. And then following an intuition, especially an intuition-led business, all of a sudden it's like, oh, these aren't all separate pieces. We're bringing them in and it's all part of the whole. And in fact, that whole is all part of us. And it's all part of our identity. Our identity is our business. It's all part of the same thing. And then also throw in there, our divine identity. And then also throw in our mission and our purpose and I even dare say, like the ministry that we have been called to do on this earth in the building up of the kingdom of God. It's all part of our identity and our business. All of it is all one and the same. It truly is remarkable.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many entrepreneurs that I've spoken to that have suffered from this syndrome of feeling like they have silos. They have this interest over here, like they're multi-passionate, right? They have this interest and this interest, or maybe this service and this product, but this book doesn't really go. And it's interesting, like just a quick story about my book. 2 years ago, I had this prompting, this feeling like I was going to write a book. And I was like, ha, ha, ha. Like, what is the book about? And then I got the answer, intuition. And I was like, okay. And then I went on my merry way. And then maybe it was 3 years ago now. I lose track of time sometimes. And then it was like, last year, like just before the end of 2019, I'm speaking with a client and the client's talking about a book he wants to write. And I'm giving him some tips and hints and, oh my gosh, you could talk about this. And then he says to me, he turns to me, what's your book about? Like, what was your book? And I said, I didn't write a book. And he's like, really? Like, why not? And I was like, okay, brushed it off. Then the next week, someone else asked the same question, like almost similar conversation. And I was like, interesting. And then the next week, I get this phone call. They leave a voicemail. It's the wrong number, but they say, your book has been chosen to be featured in this whatever prestigious event, and we need to hear from you. And I thought, that's interesting. Okay, so that's like 3 things in a row there. Maybe I need to listen to this. I know. Maybe I need to listen to this. Yeah, it comes in 3s or 2s, like listen up, right? And so then I prayed about it and meditated about it. And I was like, yeah, okay. So the book is on intuition. All right. So then I just opened up this Google Doc and I start typing a title. I don't know what the title is going to be. I just start typing and I go, The Intuition Led Business. And I was like, huh, is that the title? It was so weird. And then, that whole experience writing the book, I wrote the book in about 30 days, 45 days. And who does that? Like, it was just like, it just flowed. I just got up every morning early, wrote it, couple hours, hour each day. And then it was done. And then it sat on the shelf for a while, actually. And I didn't expect it to, because COVID hit. And then, all this other stuff seemed to be kind of in the balance. And I was wondering the whole time, I'm like, how does the intuition led business book that I'm writing have anything to do with what I'm currently doing? How is this going to help me? Like, they say, write a book, it brings in, new business, new opportunities. I'm like, this is like, if I were going to do that, I would write a book about branding or marketing or business or something like that, right? Not about intuition. So I was like, it's interesting. Whatever. I just kind of brushed it off. And then, here we are starting Soul Spectrum Universe, and it just seems like it totally fits now.
And we have a book publishing arm of our business where we do book publishing. So we needed that to be one of the books in our publishing. So
it was like I was going to self-publish, and then I was like, well, if I'm going to self-publish, we need a logo, right? And then it just kind of morphed, right? So like the back of the cover, it says published by Soul Spectrum Universe. And so it's interesting if we just trust and we're patient and we keep our eyes open and our ears open and our hearts open, like it'll all come together into the whole.
Yeah. Well, I would have just kind of a thought come into my head. I would love to just invite any of the listeners here to, or watchers, whoever's hearing this message. And I just want to invite you to start listening to your intuition. Start paying attention to how it comes in. What were some of the things you used to, receive as a child or when you were young? How do you get it now? How do you know when you hear your intuition? And just start opening up more possibilities to that. It's phenomenal ride. And if you want some support, we got some great things to support you with. We've got our intuition gym to help strengthen some muscles. Got some other great products and things. So if you want some support there, we are here for you.
Yeah, tell them a little bit more about the intuition gym, because you actually owned a fitness gym for a while. And so we saw a lot of parallels here. So how is a regular gym that you go to strengthen your physical body, how is that similar or parallel to the intuition gym?
Oh yeah. My husband and I, we had like one of the coolest gyms it's the coolest gym I've like probably ever seen. But it totally has these parallels, and I do love still going to the gym. But it's where, I started thinking, well, we both start thinking too, but I really started thinking about like the muscles and how you work them out, and how there's exercises that you can do, and even the different areas of a gym. You go do different things to strengthen different muscles, whether it be cardio or weights or some cross training, like if you want some of those styles, or if you have these different setups, different equipment. And then also we looked at like the different body styles. What were your strengths? Were there, if you're naturally more endurance type of person, and also what are your goals and your goals and what you're trying to develop? Like what muscles are you strengthening? Are you going to do a bodybuilding show? Are you training for a marathon? Are you just there for health and maintenance and for daily living? Are you, weight loss? There's so many different categories of like why you're even at the gym. And that's kind of like, why are you, do you have a business with intuition? What kind of intuition types you have? And then, and there's principles even about when you lift weights, you're tearing down the muscle, and then as it heals stronger, right? And so the same principle applies with our personal development. Sometimes there's things you got to look at and remove and release different things and like drop the, like sometimes it's hard work as you're tearing it down or releasing things in order to build it stronger. And so there's a lot of different aspects of it.
Well, I love also how it's so inclusive too, because we're fully expecting, that there's going to be people just like at the gym. You've got the gym rats and the bodybuilders that are a little intimidating.
Yeah, group fitness. You got, like, hey, I like to work out with my friends. Like that's kind of part of it.
And then you've got the newbies, right? And so it's like no judgment on where you're at in the journey, because we're all there for the same purpose, to strengthen what we've got, right? And to move to the next level. Tell them just real quickly, because I love this parallel when you're talking about the different types of muscle. And so like when someone would come into the gym, you put them through a series of tests to find out what kind of muscle they have, not how strong it is, but what kind of muscle, to determine the exercises and how that relates to intuition.
Yeah, my husband was like a genius with this stuff. He actually developed he would take his personal training clients through an assessment, and he would have them do different exercises, and based on how their muscles looked and also the muscle twitch speed, he would determine whether it was more white or red muscle mass, and all of that kind of, it's like, he's got a whole like formula with this assessment, because one muscle type is more for like strength and like bursts. Like I'm more built for love lifting heavy weights. If I do endurance, it's usually sprints or something that's like a burst of speed, where and that's more that type of the spectrum. And then on the other side is more like the lean and the endurance type. And then you can also have kind of a combo and be anywhere on the middle scale. And so those are the types. And then like, likening it to the intuitive types, and especially to like the intuitive personality, that quiz, if you're curious about this, we got that quiz going about your intuitive personality. Those are like the ways that your intuitive muscles tend to go. If you are if you've got more the feeler type things, or if you've got more like the, abstract kind of gifts, or and then so you can kind of identify how those gifts play in with your personality, because we have a body, we have our intuition moves through all the aspects of our body and also moves to our personality. So
yeah, and I love too how when you get your quiz results, you'll also find what the common intuitive block is for that type. So you can be on the lookout for that. And I think that's always helpful, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what's in our blind spot. We don't know what's holding us back. And talk about mirrors, why mirrors are important.
Yeah, every gift has a light and a shadow. Sometimes people come to me like, oh, I'm so sorry about this, or, oh, I got this weakness here. I don't even hear that language. I don't see weaknesses in anyone ever, because all I see is something to heal or a gift in their personality. And just like if I'm a stubborn person, guess what? The light side of that is I'm strong-willed, I'm passionate, I'm driven. Like all it is just evidence of my gift. And so I do love looking at that shadow. I love looking at all those little aspects of ourselves. And it's not to judge them or condemn them, but it's to love them, own them, heal them, and to see the flip side, which is more the awesomeness that we are, So yeah, I love doing all that.
Yeah, it's every sword is double-edged, right? You've got a strength and a weakness to it. And it's like in a gym, when you're looking at your form and in the mirror, it's like, you can see where you need to correct to bring yourself back into proper form. And when you also have other people around you who are in that same spirit of just helping, and we have a group in there with like engagement and things, and so
it's like the gym
can
atmosphere.
Can help you see like, oh no, honey, you're like gonna hurt your back there. Like,
well, not only that too, to see the form and to check and help there, but also too, there's something amazing about just the atmosphere. Like I've had gyms in my home, and I've had exercises and I've had videos, and I know how to do body weight exercise, and I can do all that. And I'm like, oh, I feel so weak. And then you get me in the gym, and then there's people around. I don't even think people are even caring what I'm lifting. I'll lift the heavier weights just because I'm in the gym atmosphere. It pushes me. Yeah. So it also helps me to stay connected and stay motivated, and also that form correction and making sure I'm doing it right and doing it safely with, especially if personal trainers with me, but then to make sure that I'm staying. And there's something about, especially with spiritual gifts and all of these intuition gifts that we have, there's something so powerful about it that when we get near each other, it amplifies it and they grow faster. And I think that that's what happened. Like you were like quantumly developing your gifts the last year that I've been seeing you so often, but it's like it just works quantumly, and then all of a sudden gifts are working even faster when you have people to work through it and support and questions and stuff. So
yeah, so true. And it actually reminds me, like, do you want to be the smartest person in the room? Or do you want to be not the smartest person in the room so you can actually learn something and be, pushed in a good way by the other people in the room and really learn and progress and accelerate that much faster?
yeah. Well, I love this. I love having this new podcast. I have only been on guests. Well, I did have a joint podcast before. I know you've had your podcast, but this is going to be different. This is something special. And I'm so excited to just have a place for us to pour all of our interests and all of our little ahas and connect with people. And it's just, this is going to be such a fun place to connect with others. So I'm glad
I
we're doing it.
agree. Yes. And if you want to check out the gym, it's theintuitiongym.com. And then the quiz is at soulspectrumuniverse.com/personality. So I'm going to leave it to Martina. She's going to issue a motivational goal for this week. If you're listening, what is something that someone can do to apply this information in their life this week?
Okay. Ooh, that's fun. Okay. It kind of goes along with my invitation to listen, but I'm going to give you even something more specific. And that is to test out something that normally you would dismiss. So if you've got a little impression, you can even ask yourself these questions. Is there someone for me to call? Questions are powerful. So maybe ask, is there someone for me to call today? Is there something for me to do today? Like ask some questions, or even just as you're navigating through your day and you get a little impression like, oh, you got to go here, or, oh, do this instead of this. Like listen to that voice. It comes in so quietly sometimes. And I invite you and encourage you to test it out and to lean into that instead of dismissing it. And then go for it, and like go forward with it with complete confidence and just a knowing that it doesn't matter what the turnout is on the end result, just that confidence to know that you trusted it and you listened to it. And that's where the true magic happens with intuition, is on the other side of that faith.
Visit our website at soulspectrumuniverse.com if you'd like to connect with other intuition-led entrepreneurs who are creating a ripple effect in the world.
Join us, and together we will create a tidal wave of light that washes over the entire planet.
I am Christie Turley.
I am Martina Muir,
and we thank you.